I have 7 categories of foods that every homemaker should have if and only if you want to make sure you have the foods on hand that you need to prepare delicious and nutritious meals for your family. What with supply chain issues, fires, droughts, storms, and what have you, you need to be prepared. And not only am I going to talk to you about these 7 categories, Leona at Ebony, Ivy, and Time in the Kitchen also has some tips to share. So when you're done here, be sure to go over there and check her out. Let's get it started. This video is brought to you by Aprondiva. Pretty and practical, we believe that an apron can be a homemaker's best accessory. Visit us at www.aprondiva.com. Now, the first category of foods that we believe every homemaker should have in their home is meat, unless you're a vegan or a vegetarian or a pescatarian, which only eats fish. If you're a meat eater, then you definitely want to have meat in your home. And I'm starting with canned meat simply because last week when we had a horrendous storm in this area, it knocked the power out, and my first thought was, oh my God, the freezers. So if you want to have food that's going to be shelf stable, long term, you want to make sure you have a supply of canned meats. Now, if you're not one who cans their own meats, it's okay. You can purchase canned meats from your local grocer. This is the brand that I like, the Grable Country canned meat. You can get them in the smaller sizes. This is the boneless turkey. You can get the cooked ground beef. And then the larger sizes are, again, this is turkey, this is beef chunks, and this is chicken. I have watched these cans of meat go up in price over the last few years. This size now is almost $10 a can. These smaller ounces here are about $6 or $7 a can. So if you don't want to can your own, then certainly I encourage you to purchase some, and there's probably other brands you can find that might be a little bit cheaper. I also have some canned cooked ham and some canned corned beef, and these are lovely things to work with. The canned corned beef you can use for breakfast with eggs and different things like that. And I remember when I was a little girl, one day my Aunt Glo from Chicago, and my Aunt Glo was a pistol. She was cooking breakfast, and I asked her what was she making, and she said dog food. And it was this corned beef, and it looked like dog food. And I remember we ran to our mom screaming, "Mom, Aunt Glo is cooking us dog food." Well, that's a funny thing I like to think back on, but corned beef, it's very good. My husband made some the other day with eggs and toast for breakfast. So definitely you want to start with your canned meats. Now, in addition to your canned meats though, you also want to have some fresh. Now, when it comes to meat, chicken is at the top of my list simply because right now, chicken is probably the most inexpensive meat that you can purchase, and you can get so many different cuts of it and do so many different things with it. So first of all, I encourage you to purchase a whole chicken that you can roast. So with a chicken like this, you can make a Sunday dinner, a huge family dinner, cut it in half, cut it into quarters, and make so many different things with it. One of the things I like to make with a chicken is chicken and noodle soup, chicken and noodle casserole, chicken and dumplings, and of course roasted chicken for a Sunday dinner. And I'm going to be making a roasted chicken with this chicken here today. So when I buy a whole chicken, sometimes I'll leave it whole and I'll roast it when I've had a lot of family coming over, or I might decide to cut it in half, and that's what I did with this one. So this chicken was cut in half, and I'm going to cook this one today and roast it. And I've got it on a plate so that I don't drip any juice on my counter. And then I also like to purchase those rotisserie chickens from like Kroger or Costco. They're already cooked. Sometimes they have them for like between $5 and $7. And you can go ahead, pick those up, and then vacuum seal them and freeze them. And then it's really easy to just take it out, thaw it out, zhuzh it up a little bit with your own carrots, onions, and celery, a little bit of rosemary and thyme, and throw in some carrots and potatoes in that pot, and you've got a beautiful dinner, and your family thinks you've been cooking all day. So I certainly encourage you to consider chicken as number one for the meat category. And be sure to check out Leona at Ebony, Ivy, and Time in the Kitchen, because she's also going to be covering meat, but she's going to be approaching it from a little bit different perspective. So be sure and check her out. For example, I'm not covering fish because Leona is going to take care of that. So be sure and check her out to hear how she addresses fish. Now, the next category that I'm going to address is bottled products. And bottled products, yes, it covers a lot of territory because you can get all kinds of things in a bottle. However, I'm showing you the things that I use most often that come in a bottle. And then Miss Leona is going to share some other things with you. So be sure to check her out as well. But probably the most common product, the most often product that I use that comes in a bottle is chili sauce. I use Heinz chili sauce all the time. I put this stuff on everything. I use it when I make my mac and cheese. I use it when I make chili, when I'm making tacos, when I'm making greens, when I'm making beans. I use it for so many things. However, last week I made my own homemade chili sauce, and oh my goodness, was it ever delicious. And I just may not be buying Heinz anymore, but in the meantime, I've got this one last bottle in the fridge, and then I've got 3 bottles of this homemade chili sauce, and I plan to make more as soon as I get some more tomatoes. And then I also like the Panda Express sweet chili sauce. Now, I don't like hot, I don't like spicy, I like flavor, but Panda Express has the most delicious, I think it's called sweet chili chicken breast or something like that, but it is so good. So when I saw that I could get the sauce that comes on that chili breast that they have at Panda Express, I picked that up. So I'll be using some of that because I do love Asian food. And the next item in this category of bottled product is vinegar. And there are so many different kinds of vinegar, and you can do so many different things with it. For example, this is some homemade vinegar. I made it with fruit scraps. So this is some fruit scrap vinegar that I made with strawberry scraps. Sorry. This vinegar is red wine vinegar, and you use it in a variety of different cooking projects, products, that kind of thing. And it has a flavor all its own, and sometimes you can use this instead of using wine. There is white wine vinegar, which you use a lot in some Asian dishes. And then of course you've got your apple cider vinegar, which you use in so many different things. You might use it in some chilies, you might use it in some jams or relishes and other things like that. And then of course my balsamic vinegar, which I use on salad dressings. And then your white vinegar. So your white vinegar you use in cooking. You can also use it for cleaning. There's so many different things you can do with your white vinegar. Again, in the laundry lab, you can use your white vinegar to soften and brighten clothing. You can use it to help clean your floors. And you can use it to add that little bit of acid, that little bit of tang in cooking. And when I made my homemade chili sauce, I did have to add a little bit of vinegar to that. So vinegars and the chili sauce are probably the 2 most common bottled products that I use in making meals for my family. And when it comes to spice, I don't like things too spicy. I like the flavor, but I don't like the heat. So chili sauce, which tends to be sweet and not hot, can be a nice alternative for those family members who don't like it too spicy but do like the flavor. So give the chili sauce a try. Now, coming in at number 3 on the list for 7 categories of foods that every homemaker should have is oil. And when I say oil, I don't just mean liquid oil. I also mean the hard or solidified kind, like shortening, because it is one of those oils or fats that you do use to cook with. You can use it for baking, for frying, and so many other things. And when you melt it down, it is a liquid, and you do use it as a liquid in some recipes. I'm not going to say much about it here because it's going to pop up again when we come to baking. And I believe that Miss Leona is going to talk about that, so I'm going to leave this one alone for now. But these are the oils that I tend to have in my pantry, and I encourage you to purchase at least 2 or 3 of them for your pantry. So I'm going to start right here with avocado oil. I know so many people like olive oil, and I do too. My husband loves it, but I'm out of olive oil right now. We've used it up, and that's why I'm out of it right now. But I do love avocado oil. It has such a nice, light flavor to it. However, it does have a flavor. It is not considered to be a neutral oil like the grapeseed oil, for example. I started using grapeseed oil because of Miss Leona. She was always talking about it on her channel, so I thought I'd give it a try. So I'm going to let you listen to her talk about the grapeseed oil. But the other oil I will have on my shelf is safflower oil, and it's just another oil that I use depending upon what it is that I need and if I'm looking for something that's really light. Also, I look at what is the heat index, meaning that how high can I cook with it. Sometimes we'll use peanut oil. My husband really likes to fry his fish with peanut oil because it has like a high heat index, I believe it's called. But the olive oil will also do the same thing. And then of course you've got your various vegetable oils, corn oil and different things like that, that you just use for all-purpose cooking, frying, baking, and things like that. I like to use Pam as a spray oil. So let's say, well, I am using Weight Watchers right now, and you can have 1 or 2 little squirts of Pam, and it may only be 1 point or 0 points. Or if you need to saute something and you don't want to have it too heavily oily, you can just spray it with a little bit of Pam, spray the pan, that kind of thing. Give it a quick stir and you're good to go. And then I've got this sesame oil here because I have been trying out different Asian style recipes, and a lot of times they will ask for sesame oil. So I've got some of that. And then of course my Crisco. So now what oils do I have most often? It's going to be the avocado oil, the vegetable oil, and the Pam. This safflower oil I bought, and it's taken me a while to get it used up. The grapeseed oil I'm using and I am loving. And then of course this sesame oil, I bought it for a particular recipe, which I have not made yet. So we'll see how well I like that. And then of course, everybody's got to have a little shortening or some Crisco in their home. And I was surprised that I had this Kroger vegetable shortening because I usually buy Crisco. But I must have really been trying to save a little money at the grocery store that day, because it does make a difference if you buy store brand or a name brand. So what's your favorite oil when you're in the kitchen? Inquiring minds want to know. And don't forget to go over and check out Miss Leona, because she's got some tips for you on oils that I'm sure you'll like. And coming in at number 4 on our 7 categories of foods that every homemaker should have is the baking category itself. And we've got several different things in the category, and we're going to start with flour. Why do you need flour? Well, because flour is one of those things that I call a meal maker or a meal extender. If you've got flour, you can make some things for your family to eat. For example, you can make some homemade pancake mix, and then you can make pancakes on a lazy Saturday morning or every morning, depending upon what you have in your pantry. You can use that flour to make some corn muffin mix. So you can use flour for that. But probably one of the biggest things that people use flour for is to bake bread. And I'll show you a video, I'll link it above, where I made some bread with flour, and I used the all-purpose flour. And the all-purpose flour is the white flour. It's not quite as nutritious as your whole wheat flour because it's not made from the whole wheat berry, whereas your whole wheat flour is made from the whole wheat berry, and so it's a lot more nutritious. However, they both serve their purpose. If you use the whole wheat flour and you make biscuits or corn muffins or bread, then your bread will be a little bit darker because, as you can see, your whole wheat flour is darker than the all-purpose flour. The all-purpose flour is what is typically called your white flour, and a lot of people will use that for bread making unless they're using bread flour, and I've got some bread flour here that you use for that. One of the things that I've been doing is stocking up on flour. So I've got probably about 30 pounds of flour here, which may not be a lot to some folks if they're making bread all the time. Well, I don't. I make bread occasionally. I make biscuits and I make dumplings, and I will show you how I do that directly. But I make things like that with my flour, so I probably don't need quite as much as some others might. But I want to make sure I'm storing it properly. So that flour is either stored in a glass jar, such as this, or I will vacuum seal it. And it's vacuum sealed inside a little brown paper lunch bag. And then I stick that inside my vacuum sealing bag and I vacuum it. This has 6 cups of flour in it. There's enough flour in this bag to make 2 loaves of bread. And then I store this in a 5-gallon food safe bucket. And now this whole wheat flour, I'm going to be preserving it in the same way because I don't want to get pantry moths into that. And since I don't use my whole wheat flour as often as I do my all-purpose flour, I want to make sure that it is stored properly and protected. I've got a video coming out where I'll be showing you some of the ways that people waste food, which includes not storing their foods properly. So be on the lookout for that video. Need to stretch a meal? You've got some leftover chicken from Sunday dinner. Well, make some chicken and dumplings. Here's how you do that. I made my dumplings first, and I got started with this by melting some butter in the saucepan. While the butter was melting, I mixed up the dry ingredients for the dumpling. Done with the dry ingredients, I added 1 cup of heavy cream to the butter and let that come to a simmer. One of the things to keep in mind when using this cookware is to keep the temperature at medium to low. I have a tendency to cook on high, so I am constantly reminding myself to keep the temperature down. I add the wet ingredients to the dry ingredients and stir until well moistened. Then I formed little balls with the dough. The balls will expand when cooking, so don't make them too large. Plus, the larger the dumpling, the longer it will take them to cook through. I like to get the dumplings ready first because then, when the broth is ready, I can just drop them right into the broth. And of course, we always want to add some carrots, simply because of the natural sweetness that carrots add to a dish. And it also will just help to give us a little bit more nutrients. Since I just have such a small amount of chicken, I didn't want to simmer it overly long. So I'm getting the veggies started first, and then we'll add the broth and then the chicken. And this way, that broth will be flavored nicely as well. I just put in a little bit of butter in this non-stick pot, and so far, so good. I'll give this all a good stir so that it can saute nicely, and then I'll be ready to add my homemade chicken broth. And if it looks like there's quite a bit of carrots, I probably added a few more carrots than I normally do because I wanted to make sure this dish was nice and hearty. Now I've added 6 cups of homemade chicken broth, and I'm going to just let this simmer. One of the things to remember as you make your broth is to season it to taste. This means to taste it to see if it's seasoned right for your family. You may need a bit more salt, you may need a bit more pepper, you may even like to add a little hot sauce, but season it to the taste for your family, and you might need to taste it a couple of times. So to my young homemakers, when a recipe says season to taste, that's what it means. And then when you're ready, gently drop the dumplings onto the bubbling hot broth. Cover them with a lid and cook for about 25 minutes. Now here's the tip when using this cookware. When you lift the lid, make sure to lift the lid away from you and hold it over the pot so the condensation on the lid runs back into the pot and not all over your stove. This dumpling is done. It's moist on the outside, but you can see where it's cooked on the inside. And the next must-have in the baking category is cornmeal. The first thing I think of when I think about making something with cornmeal is either cornbread muffins or skillet cornbread. They taste so good, each of them, with soups and stews and chilies and even with greens and beans and those kinds of things. And then of course at holiday time, cornbread dressing. I tend to like the yellow cornmeal. That's what I buy most often, and I just feel like the cornmeal is supposed to look yellow. However, I do have some white cornmeal as well, and depending upon what you're making, it may call for either yellow or white cornmeal. I found this recipe online for a Jiffy corn muffin dupe. I made it up with my cornmeal and my flour and some other spices. I made up the corn muffins and they tasted exactly like the Jiffy mix, and I love them. And each jar will make like 2 batches. So this jar is like 2 boxes of the Jiffy cornbread muffin mix. So I was really glad to find that. Now, when I told my husband that they were mine instead of Jiffy, he was like, oh, he said he couldn't tell the difference. Then he said, well, maybe I like these better. He was just being kind. But they really did turn out nice. So if you're trying to save a little money, you can make your own shelf-stable cornbread muffin mix, or you could purchase some cornbread muffin mix such as this or Jiffy. And then of course there is the Martha White self-rising cornbread mix, and it's got your salt and baking powder and that kind of thing already in it. So again, cornmeal is a must. Now, what other things can you make with cornmeal? Well, you can bread fish, you can make fried green tomatoes, you can make polenta, you can make your own tacos and your own tamales and different things like that. And what are you going to need to make all those lovely, delicious baked goods? Well, you're going to need some baking powder, baking soda, salt, vanilla, butter, and sugar. The baking soda and the baking powder is a science thing. Depending upon what it is you're making, whether or not you've got some buttermilk or something like that in it, you'll either need one or the other, or you may need both. Salt is necessary for flavor. You do not want to have any bread or probably any other food with no salt in it, because it just is flat and it just has no flavor. It is not appealing or appetizing at all. And then of course you've got your vanilla, which adds flavor to the food. And not only that, but your vanilla enhances the flavors of other things in the food like chocolate and possibly cinnamon. And butter is definitely one of those must-haves in the baking category. Depending upon how you use the butter, whether it's melted, if it's chilled, it makes a huge difference in the structure of your product. A melted butter helps your products to blend easier. A chilled butter helps you to have a more light and flaky crust. And then you need the butter in your baking because the butter just adds to the richness of whatever the product is. And depending upon how the butter is used will determine the kind of structure or the fluffiness or the softness of the baking product itself. So butter is definitely important when it comes to baking. And then of course you're going to need some sugar as a sweetener. Now let's talk about sweeteners as a whole. Now when we're talking must-haves and we're talking plain old white sugar, which is used to sweeten most things. And then next up is going to be brown sugar, because brown sugar also is a sweetener, but you use it differently. However, you can make your own brown sugar from white sugar by adding white sugar with a little bit of molasses, and then you'll end up with some brown sugar. But if you want to just purchase your own, then you're going to want to have some white sugar and some brown sugar. Now let's say you want to try something a little different from the white sugar. Well, there is this coconut sugar, which is supposed to be very good for you, and it certainly will sweeten your baked goods as your white sugar will. And then of course there is this date sugar that I also heard about as well. I've not used either one of these just yet, but my friend Mary at Mary's Nest talks about the benefits of the coconut sugar and the date sugar, so you can consider giving that a try. And then of course you want to have a little bit of honey as a natural sweetener, and you know honey is a forever food. It will last forever. It has such great flavor. You can use it in your tea, you can use it in baking, you can use it in so many things. So definitely when you pick up your sweeteners, you want to have your white sugar, your brown sugar, have some honey, and then you can make your own pancake syrups and things like that if you have those items. However, if you wanted to add to your repertoire, you could pick up some maple syrup, which is definitely a sweetener, and you can use it as a syrup on your pancakes. And then this blue agave nectar is delicious. It is 120 calories for 2 tablespoons. It's wonderful in tea, and it also can be used as a pancake syrup. So I thought I would show you guys that. Now continuing on the line of sweeteners, I could do pretty good, but for only so long without some kind of a sweetener. So I gotta have some jams, some jellies, and some preserves. And I have been on a tear making jams, jellies, and preserves. So here I've got some strawberry jam. Here I've got some strawberry syrup that I can use for making strawberry lemonade or for pancake syrup. Some peach conserve that is to die for, and then some peach jam. Now I made these, and as I said, they are delicious, but I don't eat a lot of them because I am trying to watch the points that I take in. However, there are some days I just need some toast with jam on it or some toast with jelly, and I get my fix this way. And a teaspoon of jam or jelly might be anywhere from 1 to 3 points depending upon what kind it is, low calorie or low sugar or not. So I think a sweetener is something you definitely want to have, because should you get into a time of deep desperation or privation, having something sweet will just really kind of perk up your meal and also perk up the spirits. So as you begin to bring things in to augment your Four Corners pantry, make sure you've got some sweets. Don't overlook them as you pick up the other items, because they too are important. Now coming in at number 5 on the 7 categories of foods that every homemaker should have is herbs and spices. And I am going to start with the basics of salt and pepper. As I said earlier, you gotta have salt because if you don't, your foods will just be flat and unappetizing. But you do want to be careful as to how much you use. And then you can also use salt to preserve some of your foods. For example, when my husband is processing his fish, he uses a lot of kosher salt or canning salt in that process. So you do need to have a lot of salt in your pantry. Not necessarily in your dish, but in your pantry. And then the other thing is pepper. For some reason, pepper just gives things such a nice flavor. And if you don't put too much in it, it doesn't get too spicy. But now, what are the other things that I use most often and I think all of you should have? First of all, there is thyme. Thyme has such lovely, lovely flavor, particularly in chicken and pork dishes. Thyme tastes so good. So I make a lot of roast chicken on Sunday, or chicken and dumplings, or chicken and other meals. So I use a lot of thyme, both dried and fresh. I use a lot of rosemary, and this past Sunday I made a lovely rosemary and thyme roasted chicken. I'll show you that. And then of course sage. You use sage in chicken and pork and turkey and so many other things. And of course Thanksgiving time, people are using sage for turkey and dressing and all that. And then parsley. It's one of those herbs or spices that just flavors the food, and it really gives a lot of flavor to potatoes. Parsley potatoes, buttered parsley potatoes. We had it all the time when we were kids. And I will admit, I do love to use a little crushed red pepper flakes. Now, I don't use them a lot because, as I said earlier, I don't like the heat, but they do add a little bit of flavor. So I might add just a dash or two of your crushed red pepper flakes. And then when I'm cooking Italian, I will use oregano, and you can make your own Italian seasoning. Hello, dear. He's out fishing today, and he always gives me a good luck phone call. He always says after he talks to me, the fish start biting a little bit better. So he is catching, so that means we'll have fish to clean tomorrow. So I think I was talking about oregano and that you can make your own Italian seasoning. So if you cook with a lot of Italian seasonings, then just make your own. I'll put a link in the description box that gives you a recipe on how you can do that using these dried herbs that I have right here. Now the thing about herbs is that they are very easy to grow. So the ones that I use most often, I've got growing in a little container on my patio. They were easy to plant and they're coming up nicely. And not only easy to grow, but easy to preserve, because you can preserve them by either drying them in a paper bag or you can put them in the freezer and freeze them. So I encourage you to try your hand at growing the herbs you enjoy most. And then the last thing I have here is garlic, and I wasn't sure where to put the garlic. I didn't know if I should put it when I do the vegetables, but I kind of feel like for me it goes with the herbs and spices because I use garlic kind of as a flavoring item. So to me it's like a spice. So where would you put the garlic? Tell me in the comment section below. And then what's your go-to herb when you're making meals for your family? Inquiring minds want to know. Now, Miss Leona uses these same spices, but she also uses some others. So be sure to go over and check her out so you can get the 411. Coming in at number 6 on the 7 categories of foods that every homemaker should have is grains, pasta, beans, and nuts. So we're going to start with rice as one of the grains that you should have. I love, love, love rice. I like rice for breakfast. You can put a little bit of butter and sugar on it and have it as a cereal. We have a lot of rice for dinner. As a side dish, I have rice with my tacos as one of the base or the bed of the tacos. We eat a lot of rice, and whenever my husband has fish, he likes to have rice on the side as well. So we eat a lot of rice. One of the rices that I really enjoy is this Rice Select Royal Blend. It's absolutely delicious. It's got about 4 different kinds of rice in it. It's got Texmati white, brown rice, wild rice, and red rice. So it is really a delicious blend of rices. And then I've been picking up a lot of rice at the grocery store. Right now with India and China limiting the rice that they're exporting, rice is going to be maybe a little bit more difficult to find here in the US and in Canada, and prices are certainly going to go up. So I've been picking up extra rice as I go to the store. I am trying to get in about 50 to 60 pounds of rice. I probably have about 30 pounds of rice right now. And rice is a forever food, so it's one of those things that you can definitely stock your pantry with, and it'll last for at least 25 to 30 years. However, as I said earlier, you got to make sure you store it right. And when I say right, that means you're going to typically store it either in glass jars or in mylar bags. Another item in this category is beans. I love this 15 bean soup. And you can have, in addition to the 15 bean soup, there's pinto beans, white beans, navy beans, garbanzo beans, just so many different kinds of beans. And if you're a vegetarian, vegan, or pescatarian, beans could be a big source for you for plant-based protein. So you want to make sure you're bringing in the beans. But as you do, make sure you are storing them properly. And of course, you've got your pastas. And I call pasta your meal makers or meal extenders, because with your noodles, different kinds of noodles, you can make chicken and noodle soup, chicken noodle casserole, chicken and dumplings with some of the dumpling noodles like the gnocchi noodles. You can use your macaroni noodles to make mac and cheese, spaghetti noodles to make spaghetti, and then lasagna noodles to make lasagna. And Miss Leona is going to be showing you a few different recipes that you can make with noodles, so be sure to go over and check her out. But in the meantime, what's your go-to pasta? Inquiring minds want to know. And last in this category is nuts. And we use a lot of nuts in our home. We use nuts in oatmeal. We use nuts in granola. Just so many different ways you can use nuts, and it is an additional protein source. So you want to make sure you've got some nuts in your pantry. And when we're looking at nuts, we can't forget about the nut butters, like peanut butter, almond butter, and those kinds of things. They're great on toast, on muffins, and in baking. So I'm going to create a rack by putting the celery, the carrots, and the onions at the bottom of the roasting pan. I'll set the chicken on top of that. I'm going to rub the chicken with a little bit of seasoning that I put together. And one of the reasons you want to have plenty of herbs and spices, particularly if you can grow some of the herbs yourself, is so that you can zhuzh up a whole hum meal. Here, all I've done is chop up pretty finely a little rosemary and thyme, and it'll add great flavor. I'll add 2 cups of water to the bottom of the roasting pan. Now we'll cover it and pop it in the oven. And so that I don't waste this chicken neck, I'm going to drop it in this pan. I'll add a few onion flakes to give the broth some flavor, a little roast garlic and herb seasoning, and just a little salt. And I'll let that simmer until the chicken neck is done, and that'll give me a perfect broth to start my gravy. And I will use some of the broth off of the chicken in that gravy mixture so that I can have a really delicious gravy that tastes like the chicken that I'm cooking. However, this way I can get it started, and then if I make too much gravy, I can put some of it in the freezer for next time. Whenever I have raw poultry or raw meat in the sink, I always follow up with a Clorox kitchen cleanup. I even spritz the handle of the soap dispenser because I did touch that. The handle of the sink. Take a look at the chicken. Oh, potatoes are done. Let's get it out and test it with a thermometer. The skin feels nice and crispy. The meat's starting to fall off the bone, so it looks like it ought to be ready. To make this gravy, I'm just going to take a little flour, whisk in a little water. Now I'm going to pour some of the broth off of that chicken neck. And now I'm going to pour that broth with the flour mixture in here. And going to take the chicken neck out for a second. I'll get a little bit of the broth off of the chicken. Then I'm going to add a little bit more water because that flour will thicken up as it heats up. And then I return the chicken neck to the gravy, and then I'll just let this simmer till it starts to thicken up. Starting to thicken up. We'll give it a taste. It's good. We'll turn that off. And it's already seasoned because I seasoned the broth when I put that chicken neck in there. So now I used the chicken neck to make gravy, and so I didn't waste that. I'm going to set this off the heat because now that it's thickened up to where we want it, I don't want it to continue to cook. Now coming in at number 7 on our 7 categories of foods that every homemaker should have is fruits and vegetables. And I know you were probably wondering, well, where are those coming in at? Well, I saved them last. I saved the best for last. And to pare it down, because there's so many things that can be in this category, we're going to do fresh, frozen, dried, and canned. So first of all, think about fresh fruits. You want to make sure you have plenty of fresh fruits when they are in season. Right now, you've got lots of things coming in. Strawberry season is just wrapping up. Blueberry season is wrapping up. But corn and apples and other veggies will be coming in pretty soon. So when you can, and it's in season, pick up some of those fresh vegetables, zucchini and squashes and celeries and things like that. Make sure you're picking those up, as well as potatoes. You can get those fresh. And then of course, you've got your fresh fruits, strawberries and blueberries. They're still, just a little bit economical. Haven't gotten too pricey just yet. So be thinking about your fresh fruits and veggies. And then next we're going to look at those that are dried. Now dried fruits and vegetables tend to be a little bit pricier. Here I've got some dried dates, I've got some dried cranberries, some dried raisins, but they are lovely. And the thing about dried fruits is they can provide a sweet. So as I said earlier, I can only go so long without having a sweet. So a dried fruit can certainly scratch that itch. You can make cookies and breads and muffins and things like that with your raisins and your other dried fruits to really create something pleasing for your family. Now next we're going to look at your canned vegetables, and one of the ones you definitely want to make sure you've got is tomatoes. You can make so much with your tomatoes. Tomatoes are definitely meal makers. With your crushed tomatoes, your diced tomatoes, your own canned tomatoes, you can make tomato sauces, chili sauce, pasta sauce, pizza sauce, all kinds of things with your tomatoes. So you definitely want to make sure you have those. And they're lovely in soups and stews and that kind of thing. So be sure you've got some tomatoes in that pantry. In addition, canned green beans, peas and corn and carrots, and those vegetables that we love fresh, you can also buy canned, and your canned green beans or fresh green beans are very, very good. Fresh carrots, I think, taste amazing. Canned carrots, not so much. So pick out what your family likes and will eat. And here's the thing, if your family doesn't like lima beans, don't buy lima beans because nobody's going to eat them. Now, when I say if they don't like them, you've offered it to them several times, you've done the 3 no thank you bites, and every time you offer it, it's still pushed away. Some things your family is just not going to like. Now, they can't not like everything, but there will be some veggies that they just don't care for. So you just don't cook those. Make life easy on yourself and your family. Just don't cook those. But everything else they have to eat. And I forgot to mention canned beans when I showed you beans earlier. You've got your canned garbanzo beans, you've got canned grilling beans, pork and beans, all kinds of beans in the can that are quick and easy to prepare. Just make sure that in case the power goes out, you've got a can opener, because you need to be able to get these things open. So you want that old-fashioned can opener that you can just put on and use your hand to get it open. You don't want an electric can opener and then the power's out and then you can't get those things open, and there's none of them are flip top. And none of the things that I have up here right now are flip tops. So there's that. When I was talking about fruit and jarred, you can also get your fruits in a jar, fruits in a can, and as I mentioned earlier, your dried fruits. And then let's take a look at our frozen vegetables. Frozen vegetables are lovely, and they taste as good as, if not better than fresh, because they flash froze them, they preserve all the goodness, and they taste amazing. So be sure to pick up some frozen vegetables for your freezer, and if you've got the additional freezer space when your local grocer is having its sale on frozen vegetables, pick up some extra. Now, out of all the vegetables that I buy, which ones do I use most? Onions, celery, and carrots. I use them all the time, and I just realized I don't have a single carrot up here. I used all the carrots that were in my fridge, so I've got some carrots in the fridge out in the garage, and I just forgot to bring them in. But out of the veggies that I use most often, carrots, onions, and celery. And oh, I got it. A shallot, which is an onion-like thing here. So So out of all the vegetables that I use most often, what do I use? Carrots, onions, and celery. I use them in so many dishes, and whenever I'm about to cook something, I'm reaching for one or the other. Roasted chicken, carrots, onions, and celery. Turkey pot pie, carrots, onions, and celery. Chicken and dumplings, carrots, onions, and celery. Just in so many things, I've got carrots, onions, and celery. It's my triunal that I like to use, so I always make sure that I've got those. And like I said, I do have some carrots. They're just in the other fridge. This is the last onion that I've got. And then, of course, here's my celery. Now, some veggies you use for flavoring, like green peppers, for example. My son did not like anything green. It was a pickle. If he saw something green in a dish, it was a pickle, and he wouldn't eat it. So when I made meatloaf, I would put the green peppers and the onions and that kind of thing in the food processor, puree it so I could get the flavor and mix that in with the meatloaf, and he wouldn't see it. The flavor would be in it and he would eat it. So sometimes you have to kind of sneak it in on him. And then probably next on that list of vegetables that I use most often, other than carrots, onions, and celery, is probably going to be potatoes, because you can put potatoes in soups and stews and chilies and roasted potatoes, roasted root vegetables, French fries, fried potatoes and onions, and just so many different things. And then the thing about fruits is, because they're naturally sweet, they can replace a dessert, or you can use the fruit as the dessert. Maybe saute it or poach it, or just simmer it a little bit to soften it up, and then you've got a nice sweet for the table that is a little bit more nutritious. I've got a bonus category for you, and that category is dairy or plant-based dairy. So for example, if you've got little ones in your home, you do still need milk for them. They need milk to grow. However, there can be some plant-based milk-like products that they can use to help provide them with the nutrients that they need. I've been using these from my preps. It's a sour cream powder and a whole milk powder. They are excellent. They make up beautifully. And then, of course, you've got cheese, but there's also plant-based cheese-like products that mimic cheese from dairy that you can use in your various foods and recipes. So don't overlook those. And then, of course, there's shredded cheese that people like to use on tacos and on other dishes. Like, I like to sprinkle some shredded cheddar on top of my chili, a little shredded cheddar on tacos and different things like that. So you can definitely get your vitamin D and other nutrients met with dairy or plant-based dairy products. And let's not forget butter, which you can use for so many things. But there is a non-dairy option. There are plant-based options for butter as well. So be sure to check those out. And if you're thinking, wait, she didn't cover blah, 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 well, Miss Leona may be covering that. So you have to go over there and check her out. And if you came here from there, welcome. For more homemaking and homekeeping inspiration, click here.